does anyone want to go first, or should I just flip a coin here? Or who wants to concede?
I'll concede. I've been talking for a
Okay.
while. Give my voice a
Oh,
rest.
you were talking for a while. Okay. Kai, you go first with your first. Let me get the timer out here
Okay.
and get it started. Okay, 2 minutes is starting now. Kai, go ahead.
Yeah, I think within this debate, I mean, frankly, going into it with the prompt that we have, I'm very kind of cautious because I don't know how much of a debate we'll eventually run into. There's plenty of levels at which we can analyze this question of like, should people get fired for their political views? What we eventually have to go to is like kind of the moral claim of like, well, what did Connor get fired for? What were the political views that he was espousing? And are those, because this is, what catalyzed this topic, are those reasonably sufficient for expelling somebody from their place of work? I'm not at all interested in debating the legality of it. I think that, an employer does have the right to suspend the employment of an individual because they may not represent, the company's vision or policy or anything like that. But I think that in reality, the way that we saw it with Connor, and also the way that it has almost happened with me in the past, I think it is a betrayal of the left wing's worldview in an effort to kind
Uh-oh.
of adhere to this idea, this Karl Popper theory of, uh-oh, is it over?
No, you're just
No, no,
lagging a
you're
bit.
still
Is the
You're
on.
still
internet
here.
bad?
Your
Oh,
internet is
good.
bad.
Okay, sweet. Okay. The Karl Popper idea, right, of the paradox of tolerance. I think, frankly, if these individuals who we're talking to, who are advocating for maybe expelling some quote unquote fascist or Nazi individuals from their places of work, are truly liberal, if they truly are empathetic or pretend to cast themselves as such, they ought to at least be able to extend that empathy a little further than just a kind of blanket intolerance of people with, let's say, more radical views. And I think this is unfortunately what's also led those same people to oftentimes shut out members of their own families. I think the worldview of under this paradigm of the paradox of intolerance is one that will create more misery and certainly more pain, and will only actually further enable the right. So I suppose in that sense, I might not even be so against it. But
Time. That's
yeah.
2 minutes. Thank you, Kai. Um, very salient points made there. Okay, Soypill, it is your turn. Let me reset this, and you may begin now.
Yeah, this is mostly pre-written, but I'll alter it a little because, yeah, I said obviously under the law, most states have at-will employment, and like Kai said, I assumed he wasn't, and he's not going to say that firing someone like Connor is this like landmark Supreme Court case that needs to be analyzed legally. But really, I mean, you can fire anyone for any sort of belief. It's not even needs to be extended to some sort of extreme thing. You can say, I don't like people who dress weird. I don't like people who have this kind of tone of voice that I don't particularly like. And I think that's totally fine. I don't think the state should be compelling people to force them to be employed for these things that may or may not make their workplace more cohesive. I think in terms of extreme beliefs, it makes perfect sense to be able to fire someone. It's usually within the company's best interest too, whether that's for workplace cohesion, making sure all the employees feel like they're at home and not afraid of someone, make sure they're productive and not, hey, can I even work with this guy who thinks this crazy thing? Or if it's just the company wanting to distance themselves from the beliefs of the employee, which are extreme. For Kai's specific example, you say quote unquote fascist. Yes, quote unquote, he called himself that. He says the Holocaust wasn't that bad, that Franco, the guy who killed a bunch of civilians, is based. He wants to end freedom of speech and democracy, deport all the brown people. It is so far past what I and most of society would consider reasonable to be fired. I think it's totally fine. And on the topic of whether or not liberals are not being nice enough to people that want to eradicate them, I don't know. Go fuck yourself, I guess. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, you want to fucking kill me, dude. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you're a fascist specifically. I saw you're kind of Groyper adjacent, but and that's not an ad hominem to you. It's just kind of a silly argument to say that, well, you're just not being nice enough to me. Yeah.
Okay, well, that was the two statements right underneath the 2 minute mark, Swaypill. Thank you. So this is what's going to happen, you guys. I'm going to have Kai have a rebuttal of 2 minutes, and then you can respond back, Swaypill. And then afterwards, I'm just going to have you guys go for a free-for-all. Okay? Sound good? So, Kai, go ahead. I'm going to start it right now. 2 minutes.
Perfect. All right. So I want to caveat this by saying that Connor's made plenty of statements clarifying his intent, clarifying maybe the more important and thought out parts of his worldview. But I do think that it is very funny that whenever these things are talked about, any kind of leftist or liberal is happy to throw in a bunch of political positions that Connor did not himself advocate for, along with ones that he admittedly did. And of course, the one that's always left out is what is the root, what is the absolute basis, the trunk of the belief system that Connor and other Christian nationalists, or even Christian fascists. I myself am not one. I'm just a conservative. But he notably leaves out what is the bedrock foundation of that belief system, which is the ultimate idea of not trespassing or depriving anybody of their human dignity. That is what inspires Connor's worldview, as at least insofar as what he has told us. And I think if we are to take him at his word that he believes in autocracy, or even that he is a fascist, we can also take him at his word that he is not against the depriving anybody of their individual human dignity, or killing anybody for that matter. But rather than engage with that more, maybe difficult point, because it is very difficult to admit that maybe your enemies are not just bloodthirsty, evil people, and casting them as such makes it much more makes it much more palatable to fire them from their places of work or otherwise. What you did, I don't know. I don't want to call you Soy Pill, but I don't know if
You can call me Soy. You can call me Niels. My name's public, so either one.
Okay, real.
And by the way, I don't know if this matters to you. I am Jewish, so if I'm glad you came here knowing that I would use my Jew magic on you anyway. So
it's like, where did that even come from?
I don't know, man.
I don't even understand why Jew magic. Why were those words like within the calculated response, as if that was like something you were getting ready to clip and post on a Twitter video?
Oh, you got me.
I don't know what Jew magic has to do with it, but again, if you're taking so serious everything that Connor says, and you're even going so far as to interject with little things that he didn't say, I think we could also engage on what is more substantive, which is the root of his ideology, and that claim that he is not in favor of depriving anybody of their individual human dignity. His belief system, by the way, is more fundamentally rooted in something that is absolute. It is not relativistic. It is something that could be applied universally in absolute ways, the way that a liberal ideology simply cannot, because it lacks the foundation of something like a God character.
Time. Okay. Kai did give you an extra 15 seconds because of the
because of the Jew magic. I appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's much more powerful than 15 seconds, I'll say.
Soy Pill, go ahead.
Oh, a rebuttal? Yeah. So I was kind of worried this is what the debate was going to start being about, because I was like, well, this is an interesting prompt about whether or not we should fire people for radical beliefs, but I figured it might get into a prompt about what is really a crazy radical belief, and is this so insane? I think what's happening here is Kai's doing a huge Mott and Bailey and saying, well, actually, just like Nick Fuentes might say, I don't hate anyone for their race. And, I don't think, I mean, people are freaks if they believe that you're just bad because you're brown, eventually coming to the point of, okay, well, what do you actually advocate for? And it's mass deportations of brown people, saying we want an Anglo-Saxon Christian nation. There's a reason he got fired. And it's not because he said, I don't want to trespass on anyone's human dignity. It's because he echoed beliefs of fasci, right-wing, Holocaust-denying people, said Franco was based, and all this other crazy shit. So if you want to pretend like that's not what he said, we can say maybe he clarified later, but his employers didn't care. If not, the fact that he lied about being employed in the first place, is Daniela point out in the first place, that he might have been fired far before this Jubilee episode at all. But regardless, there's a reason why people look at this and say, yeah, this isn't a nice person, this is an evil person. And it's not because, oh, we're just primed and woke and scared of his crazy beliefs that are just slightly outside of the Overton window. It's because he says things like, yeah, I don't think I want to condemn the Holocaust or any of those other crazy things. So if we want to have a fucking fascism debate, I guess we can. But I'd be curious to hear if you have a good argument as to why we shouldn't fire people for having beliefs that are incredibly upsetting. Because even if Connor is as nice as you says he is, he's just a sweet little boy who's trying to spread love around the world. He's still making people think a certain way about him, and whether or not that's crazy or pearl clutching, that is the reason why he was fired, and that's the reason why he would cause some sort of incongruency, lack of cohesion, or a lack of productivity in the workplace. And I think that's still a perfectly valid reason, even if they're wrong about his beliefs. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, well, you guys have made your statements. We all know the context, and if the conversation does go in areas where I'm gonna try to keep it on the original question, but inevitably, like you guys have stated, it may go on somewhere else. But I'm gonna give you guys free reign. Go right ahead, Kai, respond, and then you guys can go at it. This will be the cross-examination period. Go ahead.
Perfect. Well, I just want to start by saying it is pretty rich accusing me of, engaging in a Mott and Bailey and also, creating this intuition pump regarding the way that I've talked about Connor, saying that he's like just the most loving and carefree, kind-hearted soul in the world. It's like, I know Connor, he's a friend of mine, but I didn't have to go to those lengths in order to say that the way that you were characterizing him was maybe just a little bit dishonest. And I would be surprised if you yourself would be unwilling to admit that in describing the things that he said in the episode, you also included things that he clearly did not say, such as
can we go through them one at a time?
brown people out of the country. Would you agree with that? Let's go one by one. Do you agree with that?
To be fair, on that one specifically, I might have been confusing him with the the backwards cap guy. And I know that Mehdi Hassan asked you specifically, or would you be in favor of deporting me? And you kind of coyly smiled about it. So maybe he's not in favor of that. I could be wrong about that specific one. I know that when questioned about whether or not he's not a fan of the Holocaust, he says, well, they persecuted Christians, which anyone with a brain can figure out why he would say something like that, and not, oh, they killed like a shit ton of innocent people, and why that's the bad part. So I don't know if we want to like smugly dismiss all of the very obviously extreme things he said, but sure. Did he not say he wanted to deport every single brown person? Maybe.
Awesome. And did he not at any other? Well, hold on. Actually, maybe is a little.
Well,
short.
I to be fair, when I rewatched it, I rewatched your part specifically this morning. But I'm going through the transcript now just to double check. I could be wrong. Would you say that he doesn't want to have mass deportations of brown people, or no?
Well, now we've shifted the goalposts.
No, I'm curious.
We've talked about kicking all brown people out of the country. And to talk about what Connor mentioned, what he mentioned actually is that there are Mexicans in this country, or historic Mexicans, right, who were subsumed into the United States because of a shift in the borders of the United States during westward expansion, who, by his own words, and this is what he said, are just as American as many of the white Americans who came over in the founding years and founding decades of this nation. That's what he said. He didn't talk about kicking out all brown people. So let's just use his words.
Okay, well, cool. We can just stop there. No, we can stop there because let's stay on this point, right? All right, so sure, maybe he didn't specifically say, hey, anyone who is this shade of melanin, get the fuck out of my country, which would be, just like Nick Fuentes, kind of a ridiculous idea of just saying, well, it's only because of the color of their skin, and he can point to different reasons and justifications of this. Well, they have a more, native base in this country because they've been here longer, or they specifically have these values XYZ. I think the point is that these views are extreme. That's the reason why when you say I'm a fascist and I only care about these sorts of things and I don't believe in democracy and I want to end free speech, that they're going to fire him. If you say, oh, well, it's not the most extreme caricature of what you interpreted, which is actually probably what a lot of people would interpret, and I would guess that maybe you and him are being crypto about, but let's just take you at face value.
Disagree.
Let's just take you at face value. It's still an extreme belief set that he is representing here, and if he clarified later, it doesn't matter. This is the thing that got millions of views.
Well,
so.
I think the place that you moved the goalpost to, which is just mass deportation of illegal immigrants, that is absolutely not a radical opinion. At least to me, it's not. But I would say
that is in the Overton window. If it's just illegal immigrants, that's literally what Trump campaigned on. That's not all he said. So
exactly. And what was anything like? I mean, this is what I'm not understanding. Your original claim is that Connor wanted to get all brown people out of America. And I said
that was one of several claims I said, right? Because if you focus on that one specifically, if that's not the word for word the way that he's expressed this thing, right? It's because he's saying, well, technically there's certain Mexicans that I'm okay with. The point is that he's saying I'm a fascist. I want to end all elections. I want to end democracy, and that's why it's a completely thing that is seen as this extreme view. So if you want to play like this little minutia game on this one particular thing, I think you're missing the forest for the trees.
Well, Niels, we could have a much easier conversation if you weren't hell-bent on including a bunch of things he didn't say in with the things that he did say.
Okay.
It would be pretty easy.
If I bring up the video and I get to the part where the guy says deport all the brown people and I see Connor clapping, what would you make of that?
Well, hold on. When he says deport all the brown people, who said that?
I don't know. One of these other people. One of these other people are talking about deporting every non-Anglo-Saxon.
What lengths did you go to extrapolate that was the sincere and true message?
No. I'm asking you. I don't have the video up right now looking at that specific scene. I'm asking if we were to go through this. I'm not saying it did happen. I'm saying what would you need to see for? Well, I don't know why I would try to prove fucking Connor's racism to you specifically, but what would you need to see to say, hey, this person is maybe a little bit more outside the Overton window of what people might find reasonable? Ignoring the fact, by the way, that I started this debate.
Do you want an answer?
Well, I was going to finish, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah, what I would need to see is anything, that shows that. But frankly, the idea that Connor is outside the Overton window is not the point of the discussion. I'm pretty sure that you would agree that anybody who's outside of the Overton window shouldn't get fired from their jobs, or do you disagree?
No, I 100% agree that anyone outside the Overton window can totally be fired for the jobs with super justification. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if the Overton window then shifts in such a way as to allow for Connor's perspectives, but totally make it like unreasonable the perspectives of you or any other liberal or leftist, they should easily be able to be fired because they are now outside of the Overton window.
Yep, that's how this works. That's
okay. I think that's a stupid. No offense, it's like that's just a stupid opinion. You don't believe in like protecting your worldview?
I believe that it would be bad if we had so many fascists that we got to a point where fascism was the normal thing and anyone outside of fascism was to be fired. I'm saying it makes perfect sense. Let me finish. It makes perfect sense under the law to say, hey, for whatever reason,
people should be able to fire
for whatever reason, you want to fire someone for their beliefs because they do or do not support your ideology. That already exists. We could have a fascist company today that exists. I know there are quite a few actually who could say, hey, we just don't fucking hire people who are liberal. And that's totally allowed under the law. Do I think this is okay insofar as I wish they would hire liberals? I mean, yeah, but they can find other jobs. The problem and the reason we need to make protected classes is when this becomes so widespread that they are now excised from an entire portion of the economy, which is why we have to protect.
Wait, hold on. So you believe that there should be protected classes. If it gets to a certain point, there should be protected classes.
Yeah, and you know what? I would say that if fascism should be a protected class, if it got to the point where you are just unable to get a job anywhere, you are kicked out of every single part of everything in the economy. I think even debanking is something that I might even argue against, just in principle, because if you control the entire financial system and you don't allow this person to function and exist, yeah, you're kind of fucking them over in ways that are akin to the ways that certain discriminated groups were in the past. And so we're not even close to there yet. But yeah, I could see in some crazy hypothetical world, fascists becoming a protected class. Luckily, it sounds like Connor already has another job, so.
That's not what I was referring to, actually. What I was really referring to was the idea of a liberal, right, who's now found themselves outside of the Overton window. I don't believe it's likely that, everything will become this, I don't know what that show is called, the one where like the Nazis take over and win actually is like
Man in the High Castle.
Yeah, that one, in the High Castle. You watch more of this Nazi stuff than I do. I don't know.
I've never seen it. I just know about it. I'm autistic,
Anyway, so I think that you've amended your claim rather drastically to at least say, okay, well, anybody, because this was the claim that we had both, just been questioning each other about. Anybody who's now outside of the Overton window, it's fine to fire them for their political views, even if those views are like pretty normal liberal views by today's standards. If in the future they find themselves outside of the Overton window, it's fine to fire those people. Now, you would disagree with that, like personally, but you'd still say that it's fine to fire them. But when I pushed you a little bit more on it, you amended your statement to say, well, actually, I believe that we could create some protected classes.
So these things are not incongruent or amending. So you got to understand is that the reason we have protected classes, which I'm sure you do, but just to make it clear for the audience, just to make it clear, they're protected from systemic discrimination that would otherwise excise them from points
including in the hiring and unemployment process.
Right. So it's
like
already
firing them.
Yes, including that. Right. So the reason why
really is irrelevant.
No, it's not, because there is no point right now where someone's views are so excised from society that we have sequestered off in a completely different thing, and this like akin to like segregation. Oh, like MAGA voters can't go into these doors. MAGA voters can't do X, Y, Z. And if it did get to that point, that is like historically akin to what was doing to black people, to Mexicans, all those things, I would say, hey, there's a reasonable argument in the same way we had, black people in the 1964, the same reason we added transgender people in 2018. There's a reasonable argument to say, hey, these people are being excised from societies in ways that no matter what they're believing is unfair to them. And it's, you can say it's not intrinsic, but even religion is a protected class, because even though you can technically change your religion, I would say some of these things, just like political views, are inherited to a degree. And if it got to the point where, hey, they're being discriminated systemically wide and they can't get a job anywhere, I think we should make a protected class. But before we even do that, I think, especially for people like you or Connor and these other people that might never be able to find a job again, which I don't think is happening. I think you're employed. I think we could take a few.
You're
not? Okay. Well, if you were to be fired from
From
everywhere and you
Indeed.
could never get a job, I think there would be much more reasonable steps you could take before making the belief a protected class, where you say, hey, maybe we could say you can scrub your online presence, you can change your name. Employers don't have the right to look up, whatever your past political views are, so they can't use that in discriminatory basis if you are the sequestered group at that point. So no, these
Wait,
things
hold
are
on.
not
No,
incongruent.
no. Wait. So, so employers, I mean, that none of that will work. The employers would be unable to research information about people who are part of this, like you said, sequestered class. Well,
Like, you're
by
not
the
allowed to
very,
use
by the
social
very
media.
fact,
No,
by the
just
very
period.
inability,
This
by
is
the
a
very
period.
inability of an employer
This is
to
not.
research the background of an individual, it would imply that they believe these things that are outside of the
No,
scope of
right.
normality,
Which is
and
why,
send off more red flags.
this would be not a specific to, like, hey, this group is the people you're not allowed to. They have a special little sticker. Yeah, obviously they would identify them as a member of the group in the same way that they had. I don't know if you know about blind auditions for orchestra stuff, where they'd say, hey, instead of looking at the people, because that would cause them to pick certain groups and faces, you have to just listen to what their music is. Although that kind of fell through, because then they could hear high heels and started discriminating against women. But the point is, yes, there are some steps you could take to say, hey, maybe there's some ways that these people could be reintegrated in society without forcing them to be this like pariah class of people. And if those steps didn't work, let's say you're right and these things never worked, then yeah, I would say maybe we need to make a protected class for MAGA people, because otherwise they literally can't function. We don't have a cohesive society. But yeah, that's not even close to where we are now. And I think that Connor's demonstrated that, because he can still work.
But Niels, wouldn't that be preferable?
What?
Like, if these people couldn't get jobs, like, why is it better?
So it depends, right? Like, let's say MAGA was this group, right? And a MAGA person can't get a job anywhere. That would destroy our country. This is like, 30%, 40% of the country, or some ridiculously high amount of people. So just because they have beliefs that I don't like doesn't mean that they shouldn't be part of what otherwise would not function, which is society. Now, the difference is when you get to the fascist, yes.
Can't just like exclude this significant portion of the workforce.
Well, if you want to talk about morality of like, oh, should someone be excised, we can get into that too. But the problem is,
that's what the conversation's about. The conversation is about whether or not somebody should be. Like, it is a question of morality. It's a question of whether they ought to be kicked from their job for their political views. That is the debate. That is the topic.
Right. So in the world that we exist in now, especially for having views that you or Connor might have, I guess you're saying that he's a little more extreme. It's perfectly reasonable to fire people for that. And like I said, you talked about, well, you're saying, it seems like you're walking back because you're saying anyone outside the Overton window, maybe that's liberals in 10 years or whatever. I'm saying way past that. I mean, legally, you can fire people for almost fucking anything. If I wore that Mario hat, if they found out Pickle Rick was an episode of Rick and Morty I ever watched, they could fucking fire me. And I think that's fine. The problem becomes when it's a systemic wide thing where it's like, oh shit, now we are just like completely excising an entire group of people from society. And that's not anywhere close to where we are for any of these extreme beliefs. And especially the problem becomes when you have fascists is, hey, yeah, sure, maybe it is even pragmatic to let, if they were such a big group, excised back into society, but then they destroy the society that you treasure and are trying to preserve by pragmatically letting them back into work. So you get a couple other problems there.
Well, exactly. And that's what I'm trying to ask you. It's like, if that's the risk that you're tolerating, like, why tolerate that risk? Why would you not do other things? Why would you not try to, why would you not implement maybe a less restrictive immigration process? Why would you not expand the opportunity for naturalization so that you wouldn't have to employ these kind of MAGA or more fascist leaning people? You could exclude them because their views would be anti-democratic, and you could just include a bunch of the workers from foreign nations who have less of an American nationalistic tendency. They don't feel a direct tie to the nation. Would you be in favor of that maybe as an alternative to employing all of the MAGA Republicans?
So wait, hold on. Now we're in this like super deep hypothetical where we've got many fascists.
Like, we're working off of exactly the things
to be clear,
the things you have just described.
No, right. But in my hypothetical, when I say deep, I don't mean like, oh, it's super deep level, but like we are deep in the hypothetical insofar as, okay, we do live in a world where there are so many fascists. So let's say every MAGA is a fascist, and 40% of them, and we're like, hey, you can't work here because you have crazy views, and the entire country is all agreed, top down. No, that's not the case now. I'm saying this is in our hypothetical, right?
Well, no. So, but I just for the scope of the debate, I want a perspective on your perspective. No,
sure. Do I think that all MAGA is fascist? No, not even close.
What do you think the like proportion is of MAGA that you would call fascist?
I don't have a number off the top of my head. I think the more extreme versions of what people believe, I think most people don't even know what the fuck fascist means. I've read a whole book or two on fascism, and I still probably couldn't give you a coherent thing, which is kind of like tied into how fascism works. But if I were to say, let's just say who in fascism, like in the MAGA party, would
You think
specifically
Donald Trump
support
is a
it?
fascist?
I think he has pretty fashy tendencies, but I don't know if he even knows as much as he is a fascist, or like, you know, is doing some sort of, hey, I'm promoting fascism. I think that a lot of people would
I
support
think you might be downplaying the
if
true
Donald
feelings
Trump.
on the subject,
No, 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 no.
because
Let me
it
be
might
clear.
not be
I
good to
don't.
call him a fascist.
It wouldn't be good to call him a fascist. Why not?
No, because then you would basically be implicating most of his base.
No, see,
I think
this
that
is
would
what I was
follow.
about to explain, is that I don't think most people look at this and, one, understand fascism, but two, if they did really understand what they're going along with, I don't think people think this deeply about politics. I don't think 90% of the people you pick off the street, who even 90% of people who are politically involved, could like accurately define and understand and try to say what fascism is. I think what you can see is Donald Trump is able to get a bunch of people to go along with whatever he says, and if that were to be incredibly dictatorial fascist things, a lot of people would be fine with it. And we can see that you know, people support him despite any and all things he does that would violate rights, or you know, step on other people's rights. He doesn't seem to care. So do I think that, you know, the majority of MAGA is fascist? No, but I think a majority of people who are still supporting Trump to this day would go along with a fascist government with kind of this blissful ignorance, as long as it wasn't affecting them.
Okay, then built off of that, if most of those people would be happy to go along with a fascist government, and I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that there's this non-zero chance that Trump somehow retains control, or we have another January 6th type insurrection. It's not unprecedented. If that's the case, then to you, why do you, I don't want to presuppose your position.
Sure.
What is more tolerable? Allowing those people into the workforce, or promoting their mass displacement in the workforce because it enables their participation in civic society?
Yeah, no, I see where you're going. I reject this dichotomy, but I'll still indulge in what you're saying, and that is,
I
look,
think you
well, hold on.
like,
Let me clarify.
Set up that dichotomy.
Sort of, but if you're talking about this in like the way it's happening now, again, like as much as I think Donald Trump is leaning into fascism right now, like I said, most of these people don't even understand that, or if they would go along with it, if they would go along with it, do not profess the beliefs, that someone like you or Connor have. And so, no, I don't think we should reject these people. We already have these people. I interact with these people all the time at jobs and day-to-day life, and the reason that they are not people that I would eject, and people that I would say are you know, some sort of detriment to the workplace, is because clearly they're not like causing this discohesion. At worst, in the most liberal areas, it's, hey, I'm MAGA, and that like freaks everyone out. But for the most part, you don't have people going out and it's like, hey, you know, Dave, he's MAGA. Oh, okay, he just thinks Trump isn't as radical. But then he goes on Jubilee and in front of millions of people says, yeah, fucking, I want the autocrats to kill the dissidents and shit, you know? So like this is like not, you're trying to equate all of MAGA with the most extreme versions of what, like I said, you and Connor have. You guys are a much smaller part of the party, fortunately growing part of the party, but it is not what I would call most MAGA people.
Okay, well, I would then, to bring it outside of maybe the deep hypothetical that we had gotten into.
Well, it seems like we kind of stepped back from the hypothetical. I think you were trying to paint that as kind of what's happening now, no?
Wait, stepping back from the hypothetical?
It seemed like when I was trying to exist in this world where it's like, okay, there's this 40% of the country that's fascist. I was saying that's 40% of the country that are like, you know, Connor, right? I think you kind of try to not step back like you're backpedaling, but just like, no, let's step into like what's happening now, which is there are all these people that ostensibly by your, you know, logic are fascist because they're still MAGA. What do we do about them? Should we excise all of them? And my answer to that is no, most of these MAGA people are not so extreme and radical, even if they're supporting Trump.
The reason I'm stepping back is because I didn't really, like, I'm trying my best to establish a kind of consistency on your part, but I think there's a disconnect. I think that you are willing to admit that at least 40%, maybe even a majority of these MAGA people would be, and in fact, you said a majority of these MAGA people would be willing to go along with a fascist totalitarian regime. They would, at the minimum, be useful idiots in a fascist regime.
Sure.
Those are the kind of people that these kind of regimes rely on to exist. Yeah. These are the people who have the authoritarian personality. If you are able to deduce and you are able to realize that the people around you, a significant portion, have the authoritarian personality and maybe are even being every day more and more radicalized, I think in a pure sense of cost benefit analysis in your position, it makes much more sense to excise those people, to kick them out of your communities. Those are the people who will allow nationalism to rise. And that's exactly what's happening right now. The last election showed us the popular vote was won by Donald Trump. Every swing state was won by Donald Trump, and not on a more democratic, not on a more liberal platform, on a platform that was more radical than prior platforms, talking about the largest scale mass deportation platform that the United States had ever seen. You're worried about all of those things, but then when you admit that the majority of Republican voters would be happy to see that kind of fascist government take control, you're then unable or unwilling to actually do something about it. But when we talk about specific instances, like with Connor, or like with some other Republicans like myself, or conservatives generally, then in those minute cases, you would say, well, it is totally acceptable.
Yeah, I don't see what this is so hard to grasp. So like your and Connor's views are not even close to like the mainstream Trump platform. And so the reason I would say, hey, yeah, there's these thousands, if not millions of useful idiots who might enable what I would call fascism.
I don't know if you believe that.
I promise you I do. And I don't know if you're going to like, if we want to dive into your view.
It's like,
look, I have a lot of Republican friends and family, and I don't want to rely on anecdote, but we can look at polling for this stuff, and like, saying like, oh, how many people like support miscegenation, like versus like, hey, how many people say mass deportations, are like drastically different numbers. So yeah, there's a lot of racist Republicans, obviously, but the amount of Republicans who I think have at least palatable enough, if not well acceptable views for what I would consider in the workplace things that could easily be swapped back just as much as they're idiots for Trump, could be idiots for left wingers too, and can be convinced by a populace like the same way that Bernie Sanders voters jumped over to Trump and Trump back to Bernie. These people are convinced by invigorating rhetoric, and most people just fucking care about the economy and their day-to-day life. I don't think these people in and of themselves are nearly so tuned in and fascist as, say, someone who's constantly like lionizing Franco or saying the Holocaust is not that bad except for the Christian deaths. These are so far off, and your conflation of them is kind of ridiculous. I don't know if you are delusional and think that you're more mainstream, but I promise you, you're super more extreme.
The two. I am not conflating the two. I'm telling you that you need the less, like, maybe politically literate, the less civic minded people, but those who are still like these authoritarian personality types, those are the people you need in order to create the kind of fascist dictatorship you talk about. It's not just going to come about because, Connor gets into power. It's going to come about. Yeah, but it's
who's doing the work, right? Like, am I putting, like, when we denazified Germany, were we doing Nuremberg trials for the entirety of the German population? No, not even close. And we had all this, like, re-education and Marshall Plan and stuff. The problem is there are certain peoples who are going to be doing the perpetrating and the pushing of this incredibly radical fascist ideology. And just because the whole country, if not a lot of the country, goes along with it, does not mean that suddenly we can now excise all of them. One, it's not practical. Two, it's just not right, because those people necessarily can be convinced otherwise, as seen by now Germany's history over the past like 60 years. So no, obviously you don't want to exercise.
Three, under the confines of the debate, you wouldn't even be in favor of excising them, because if the Overton window continues to shift in the direction which it is moving, then those people would really have no reason to be kicked out, because they find themselves firmly within the bounds of the Overton window.
Well, you understand is, in fact, morally of what I believe should be able to be happening in the
side of it, the liberals.
So just to clarify, because I think some of these times you're like, well, oh, but this could be used against you. And I'm saying, yeah, I know. I'm totally okay with excising people for whatever belief, which is already how we do it. This isn't anything about shifting Overton windows or where we're going to be in 10 years. You could right now have a fascist business that says no liberals. You could say no MAGA. You could say, hey, if you talked online ever, I'm never going to hire you. And all of these things would be completely legal. The only things in certain states that are not legal that I'm not, or that I am okay with, is that you can't do it if they're politically organizing, if they are running for government, and there's like some third thing. I don't remember which one of those, but it's like, yeah, like if you want to say, hey, just so you know, like you want a world where like they could kick out all the, like that already exists. That's the world I live in, and I'm okay with that. Now, if you want to get into the morality, wait, hold on. If you want to get into the morality, let me just finish this point and then you can go. If you want to get into the morality of like, oh, but wouldn't you be upset if they kicked out all the liberals? Like, yeah, 100%. If suddenly they shifted the Overton window and said, hey, being black is not a protected class, I want to kick out black people, yeah, I'd be upset. That is the framework in which we work in now, and eventually it could shift there, and then I would argue for different tactics. But the problem here is, hey, what are you allowed to kick people out on? Fucking any belief, as long as it's not religion. That's where we're at.
I think that's the issue, is that the way that the politics is being discussed today is increasingly in a sense of intersectionality. You have to talk about these things, not as in like one or the other, but things that intermingle, things that mix. This is why on college campuses and in many social spaces, especially in more liberal parts of the country, things like whiteness, these intrinsic attributes, become something that you can begin to discriminate people about. You can create Black-only spaces, you can create protected classes, which are not simply
to be clear, you can't exclude white students from Black-only spaces. You'll just get a little vitriol, and I know because I went to the most like liberal fucking colleges, and you can still go into fucking Black student union, female-only spaces. They'll just be like, what the fuck are you doing here? But you're legally not allowed to, and if you are being discriminated for a protected class like that, you go to the EEOC and file a thing, and you'll have a court case, and you'll sue them and win a fuck ton of money. And in fact, in Ames versus Ohio, fucking Ketanji Brown Jackson already wrote like a thing about white men getting discriminated against, and it's like, yeah, no, this still falls under Title VII. They don't have to meet some undue burden because they're the majority class. That's still fucking illegal. So I don't know what you mean when it's like, well, we're pushing the Overton window to let Black people excise. Like, no, we're actually not. You're not allowed to do that. And if they are doing it, they're getting fucking killed in court in unanimous decisions.
I think we're very lucky that it's gone that way, but I absolutely like if there was another round of Democratic presidencies and certainly a more liberal sided court, I think those kind of things could turn around on a dime. My issue is that these kind of things are changing at the whim of an individual at any point, and I think that there ought to be at least a little bit more of a consistency and empathy. I'm not here again.
Wait, what's inconsistent about it? I guess is what I'm confused about. And before you answer that question, when you're saying, oh, it could turn on a dime, I mean, what Connor advocates for is electing a fascist and making sure no one ever gets protected again, and only the people he wants to be, protected, and everyone else to get killed. So, what do you mean?
Okay, again, it's like. What?
Okay, so if you watch the debate, when Mehdi says you understand that, like, people like Franco who are killing dissidents, and, he's like, well, they're just the bad people. Oh, sorry, go ahead, because we talked over each other.
Why are you more believing of words that Connor didn't say, and why do you...
So, okay, so here we go. So, yeah, in the debate specifically, when pressed on this, Connor said, hold on, wait,
the words that Connor
hold
did
on.
say.
These are the words that he did say. I don't know if this is verbatim what he said, but when talked about, hey, Franco's killing a lot of dissidents, and just to be clear, like he said, well, Franco only killed nuns, people who raped nuns, and all the bad, evil people in the White Terror. He totally killed tons of innocent people, because the way it works is if you choose or accuse anyone of being in this group that is the bad group, they get killed, usually without some sort of significant investigation. So he was an advocate for this kind of government, this sort of autocracy. He's an advocate for a crackdown on freedom of speech, an end of freedom of speech, and an end of democracy. So I don't think it's a big of a stretch to say that after he said, yeah, no, I'm the group that's not going to be killed, that he advocates for the group that's not him to be killed. But, whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is, actually, what was the point? What was the question I asked you before we got into whether or not Connor said a bunch of ridiculous shit?
No, I stopped you at the point where you said that he was advocating for mass killings, which is something that he didn't do. I'm not here, obviously, to relitigate, Frank or any number of dictators. And I'm also not here, like I want to, again, remind you, I'm not here to justify everything that Connor said.
Oh, right. So what's the inconsistency? Was my question.
And in which case?
So you're saying like, oh, well, liberals will excise, people they deem fascist or whatever, but they won't excise blank. What is that double standard that you're seeing?
I don't know if that's the way. No. That kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. If I'm thinking of the right thing, it is this idea like whenever you apply this philosophy, the liberal ideology consistently, when you talk about those ideologies, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe there's a different thing that you're operating under, but the principle which justifies the exclusion of people like Connor is the paradox of tolerance. It is the idea that if he is going to be completely intolerant of democratic principles, then why include him in a democracy? Is that kind of the framework that you're operating under?
Well, that's like 3 steps ahead of my initial argument. We'll get there, I guess. But it starts off as, I think you should be able to excise anyone for anything as long as it's not something that they can't control and it has a historical, a reason to be discriminated against. So past that, if you want to say, hey, should we let fascists into a democratic society and say, hey, your ideas are just as good as everyone else and we should respect you? No, absolutely not. Like you said, yeah, paradox of tolerance. So these people are going to use your kindness and empathy to try to deconstruct it. So why should we give it to you?
Yeah, this is why I was talking about like the consistency thing. Like your entire argument about the Overton window. Would you be willing to recant that? Like I was honestly a little baffled when you said that you'd be in favor of kicking anybody out who just wasn't contained within the Overton window.
Well, that you understand is because when I say I'm in favor of kicking anyone out for anything, the way the law works now, everything outside the Overton window is included in that, right? Like that's everyone. Like it's anything from I don't like your Hawaiian shirt to you're a fascist. I think both of these things are acceptable to kick someone out of the job for.
I think we keep blending in this idea of like the legal precedent, what you can legally, kick somebody out for.
Right. Well, I morally I agree with how the law currently
the
works.
libertarian ability of it.
I'm saying morally I agree with how the law works, Kai.
Not make a gay wedding cake or make a gay wedding cake.
I'm saying morally I agree with how the law works.
Sorry, you cut out real quick.
My morality is an extension of how the current law works. I think the law is fine as it is, and I agree with it.
Okay, that you can discriminate and kick somebody out on the basis of anything. That isn't
anything that's not a protected class. It seems to be fine the way it's working now. Yeah, I seem to be fine with it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm curious then where the inconsistency comes from. Where I would employ the paradox of tolerance and say I don't want a fascist in my society. Let's say we're not talking about jobs anymore. I just don't like the fact that fascists exist, and if I can't change them, that I'd rather them be gone. Where this is inconsistent, if I'm saying, oh well, I guess liberals can be excised if the Overton window shifted. Like, could you explain that a little more?
No, I think you're maybe a little bit more consistent, but I don't think I don't think what you're saying accurately reflects the reality of our politics today. Like I had an interesting case where, when I was beginning to make videos on political TikTok and I was talking about immigration restrictions, I really, truly, I mean, you might not believe me, but I really, truly wasn't saying anything too ridiculous or too crazy. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, an immigration moratorium is outside the framework of the Trump presidency. It's been maybe touted or teased by people like Stephen Miller, but it is something that is outside of the platform of President Donald Trump. But as a response to that, I had, the Democratic Socialist Hype House on TikTok call an Italian, immigrant who was my boss and attempt to get me fired from my job. And I think that the way that the society right now stacks up, it does place an incredible amount of social value on the side of liberalism.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
It puts that and pits it, and it pits it against people who are more right wing. The issue is, and this is where I think lack of consistency appears. You are kind of falling back on the idea, the fascists, the guys that get it, the fascist theorists who would take over the government and kill people, those are the guys that we really got to kick out. But most Republican voters, we don't. Well, it's totally reasonable to assume that the Republican platform shifts in much more authoritarian directions. I don't think that you think that's unreasonable.
No, it's empirically true, yeah.
And if it does, then those 40 or 60% or that simple majority that we were describing earlier now is very reasonably falling into a group of fascists. Okay. Are you saying that we should simply not, disemploy them because they are not as educated in their fascism?
See, this is where I'm a little confused because I think what we have here is two completely different problems, right? If I'm an employer...
I'm all over the place at this point.
Oh, no worries. I understand. You got off a flight. You had 3 screaming babies in your ears. It makes sense. All right, look, you've got... All right, I'm an employer, and I have a guy who said some what I would consider, what many people would consider extreme beliefs. Now, again, this is past the point of like anything that you can fire them for. It's just, hey, I don't like this guy. He's causing problems in the workplace. That is ejecting him from the workplace. That makes perfect sense to me from a monetary thing, from a productivity thing. Sure, perfect, whatever. Now, if we're talking about society, and we get to well, hold on. Let me just
clarify.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, when you describe the issues, because we've been saying that he's causing issues in the workplace. How are those issues coming about?
Right. So let's say he never says anything political at the workplace. He's a great worker. He's efficient. Let's say he's the top worker, right? But there's a video of him on the internet where he says, Holocaust, who gives a shit? And suddenly everyone's like, hey, this guy's being a little fucking weird. I think he might have some pretty radical views about minorities or anything. Huh?
Mr. Neal.
Sorry?
Lots of F words. Let's calm down with the language. But yeah.
Are you tone policing?
It's a free speech zone.
Wow, that's wild. Okay, yeah. Let's say he frickin' said some frickin' crazy stuff. Then I would say it would be perfectly reasonable for them to assume, like, or even not assume. Let's just say it's like I said, they're completely misinterpreting him. He is like, I'm not saying this is what you said, but let's say he's just a lovey-dovey Catholic person who just wants everyone to be happy, and it was completely misinterpreted. It was taken out of context. Doesn't matter. The optics of it being something that causes discohesion, where everyone's like, "Hey, this guy makes me uncomfortable." That's all you need. That's all you need to kick someone like that out. If whether or not he is a fascist. Yeah, that's how it works now. That's how it works everywhere. Look, I don't know if you ever heard of like any story of like, hey, this guy was creepily staring at me, but it turns out it was just some ugly guy who just did not know how to make eye contact. It doesn't matter if he is, actually creeping on women. It doesn't matter if he's... Yeah, exactly. It's the meme, right? But the problem is, it doesn't matter because functionally you are making everyone else uncomfortable. And if you can't rectify that in whatever workplace that is, yeah, there's a perfectly reasonable reason to kick you out. And that's why I keep saying...
The ugly guy?
Huh? I mean, in this crazy
Like, you're gonna fire
hypothetical,
the
I'm
ugly
sure
guy?
this has happened before. But look, I was saying, if you are in a world where it's like, hey, this is the MAGA company, we're at the MAGA store. There's plenty of MAGA stores I've visited across the country, and some liberal applies, and it's like, hey, I know you don't talk about liberalism, you're not preaching your politics, you stock the shelves, great, but unfortunately, everyone knows you're a fucking crazy progressive, and we all think you're trying to destroy the country. You're a party of the pedophiles. You want to get rid of Trump. You help support the guy who tried to shoot him. We don't feel comfortable with you here. Yeah, I think it's totally fine to fire that person.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. Like, to me that just seems a little bit ridiculous. Maybe again, I'm not making this legal argument of how we would rewrite it, because frankly, I'm not sure. I think it's a pretty difficult thing to legislate, and that's why Supreme Court cases on the matter are often difficult. You know, there's a reason this comes up. These issues of discrimination in hiring and in firing practices come up so frequently, and it's also why when people when people are fired, the motives for the firing are often, they seem much more inconspicuous. The
Well, sure,
reasons
yeah. If you're trying to fire someone
need
for
to
a
be chalked up
protected
to something.
thing, they're gonna make something up that
Yeah,
is
they
not
have
the
to.
protected
More
thing.
administrative.
But I mean, this is super good faith. I'm super curious. Let's say my MAGA scenario is real. Can you not understand that regardless of whether or not they're right to do it, to kick out this liberal person, if every single person in this MAGA sphere at this MAGA world store is like, look, this guy's just kind of giving me like bad vibes. Like, I know I've seen videos of him online being progressive, and I don't think I like the progressives. I think they're evil. And no one is getting stuff done because they're all complaining about it. Why would you not be okay with them firing them? If they then hired a MAGA person, everything goes back to normal, they are productive, and everything's fine. Like, what is the issue here?
I think the issue is that a lot of the harm that is caused in the workplaces is self-imposed by those people who react to it,
Sure.
and that, I think, is maybe our ideological split. I don't believe that we ought to simply govern the country because there's a bunch of people who are made the most easily unhappy. Just because one group is maybe a little bit more tolerant of some of that, and the other group is more unhappy and is more willing to raise their voices about it, doesn't mean that we ought to completely cater to the voice of those people. And that's why I think that in most true cases, and admittedly this is changing a little bit, there's some MAGA moms who don't make a good representation of it, but I think in most cases, when you do see those major pushes on employers, pressure that is not just on individual workers but on employers themselves, those kind of pressures come frequently from liberals. It is the right that only in recent years has began to emulate that. They've started boycotting beer companies that will make like gay
That's
ads
no.
and stuff like that.
Okay,
But
I
I
don't know
think
how young you are, but this is not a recent thing. You've ever heard of the Dixie Chicks? Cancel culture, Satan panic, like goes back decades and decades and decades, and the right is not new to this. This is cancel culture, and boycotting has existed forever.
Most of the time, though, it is certainly in the last couple decades, it is either in reaction to, like, in order for the right to exercise the same kind of moral authority that the left is exercising, or it is a less successful version of what the left is already doing. Like, I understand
I would say the
Chicks
only
example.
reason you perceive it that way is because liberalism is the mainstream view that has been growing since like 2005, 2008 era into the mainstream, especially post Barack Obama. So when you saw this sort of stuff before both of our times, it was when the mainstream stuff was a George H.W. Bush and president, and there's a little more of a like decorum of like civility, politics, and like, oh, that person dresses a little weird, and policing people who say like all the swear words in the rap songs. And the stuff that you're doing right now is nothing new. I mean, again, that's stuff from the 90s and the 80s. Like, it's completely depends on what again, Overton window or whatever the current culture is. It's not like a left or right thing.
And that would basically be my argument. It's that the Overton window, the way that shifts should not just be the thing that is dictating our response. I think that might be just what it comes down
But
to.
again, that's the Overton window is a extension of how it works, which is I'm saying it should be anything at all. I think if everyone in your fucking store is colorblind and you're wearing like colorblind stores, and it's like, hey, you're making everyone upset because I can't read your fucking shirts. Like, yeah, I think you should be able to kick that person out. Like,
okay, are you saying that legally you should be able to kick that person out?
No, I'm saying morally. Morally, it makes perfect sense to me to run a business in the most productive way, even if that means kicking certain people out. That I would say you shouldn't really be discriminating against someone for their liberal beliefs. It doesn't really make sense to me, but it does make sense if you are hurting your bottom line, if you are worried about cohesion in the workplace. It's like, yeah, okay, like this makes perfect sense. Why not kick that person out? And then if we get to the extension of like the person in question here, it's not just, oh, he believes that Trump is a cool guy. It's, hey, this guy's got questionable beliefs about the Holocaust and killing people. Like, even if that is something that he doesn't truly believe, which again, I think you are very much downplaying his beliefs. Let's just say these people understand it that way. That's fine. It's causing problems in the workplace, and they don't want him there because he said some crazy shit, or at least perceived crazy shit. It makes perfect sense to me to kick that person out.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is the ultimate impasse, right? And it's difficult because every single time we try to talk about it, I think you kind of incessantly, and maybe now you are just straight up telling it to me, and I just can't fathom it. I can't fathom the idea that we should just kick people out because it's like the shirt is bad and people don't like the shirt. No, I don't think you should kick somebody out because they
I
wear
don't think
a shirt.
You should. I think you should be allowed to.
I think that legally you could be able to do that. I think that legally you should be able to do that, but I don't think you as a person should. I think there probably as a society and probably as a company, there ought to be some introspection, and we ought to be able to realize that the true conflicts that are arising, the true, way that this is hurting the bottom line is in the way that all of the other people watching are allowing it to affect them. I don't think it's because it's truly voting in fascist legislative policy. I don't think it's because Connor or any other individuals truly doing major harm. If that were the argument,
no, he's not. He's not actually doing harm in his comments, right? Like him saying "I'm a fascist" is not going to disrupt the workplace physically. It's not right. Exactly. But Right. I'm agreeing with you, but the problem is when everyone sees, hey, this guy is a fascist, and I know what he thinks behind the surface, and all that comes with that, they don't feel comfortable working with someone who might, hey, I don't like, necessarily the type of people that work here, the type of people that work, how they look. I don't think that women here should have as much of a say, but I'm just going along with it. And suddenly you've made this, toxic work environment where everyone else is not okay with that. But like I said, if you had a fascist business, if Connor and all his friends, and it sounds like he's employed by his family now, who probably have very similar views to him or just don't give a shit, say, hey, I want these views here. That's cool. I don't give a shit. You can do that. So I just don't see the issue with saying, hey, I have a company with a specific company vision. And if that person, no matter what the extremity of they believe, if it's the colors they wear to I want to kill people, I don't want those person at my company. Why should we, where do you draw the line? If not, hey, I can draw it wherever the fuck I want. Like, where are you going to draw the line for political beliefs? Where are you going to draw the line for, dress code and all that sort of stuff? It just makes so much more sense to say, hey, as long as it's not something you can't control and is not excising you from society, you should be allowed to, be fired for fucking anything.
Yeah, I think at the same time, the idea of excising people from society is something that exists in a soft way, often more frequently than in a hard way of like institutions. Certainly institutions will do it, but I think it exists in a soft way, in a sense of social pressure, and then eventually that social pressure creates the context that we're in right now. And I think that social pressure will also, the soft social pressure, it creates a context wherein which people feel more empowered to be more offended. It's this massive spiral to the point where, like I was saying, eventually an average Republican will be seen as somebody who is in the same line as Connor. There is no real way to divorce it. That's what I'm telling you. And I understand what you're saying, but frankly, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you are totally okay. I don't believe that you believe people totally should create just like no gay work zone. And that, then again, that gets to the second part. How intrinsic is it? We could have a discussion about how intrinsic is somebody's, sexual orientation. Is it something that can be socialized? Is it something that they can learn over time? All of that is much more nuanced than I think you're making it out to be. Because
no, it is, and that's a whole nother part of the debate where if you want to start talking about like what is and isn't a protected class, and many things weren't as like 20 years ago, like that's a much harder debate, because at the end of the day, that's going to come down to what am I okay with and what am I not okay with, and has literally nothing to do with the law. It's just like, hey, I don't think we should discriminate against black people and gay people and trans people, but a lot of people today think, hey, trans, that's a ideology, that's an idea, that's not a intrinsic thing you're born with. People are groomed into that. So it's like, well, what do we do when we don't think that is a intrinsic thing? That's a belief. Well, that's when I just say, well, my morality trumps, and I'm glad the Overton window is where it is, but that's a whole other discussion. So
well, yeah, and exactly. This is why I raised the point before, and admittedly, the Supreme Court precedent might sit a little bit more on my side with, for instance, what you cited from Justice Brown. But the idea that we have about racism, for example, is something that is certainly changing. In fact, in Merriam-Webster, the definition of racism has been changed in order to amplify a vision that is not just.
Oh, is it the prejudice plus power now?
It's prejudice plus power. And if that is the framework under which we're operating, and the idea is that white people specifically have institutional power, it might not be Merriam-Webster, it might be a different dictionary.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just looked it up just to say it seems like it's not I mean, there is a definition. So first of all, I mean, definitions are defined by how people use them, and if enough people start saying that, like you said, that racism is prejudice of power, which, by the way, I disagree with. I think that is a very poor definition because there's a word for that. It's called systemic racism. Yeah, that they're going to use it as in the new definition, or at least a subsequent additional supplementary definition, in the same way that literally means figuratively now, because enough people started using it like that. But I don't think that's an indication that somehow everyone's going to justify being like racist to white people, insofar as it's going to cause the Supreme Court to go back on what even today, with the most DEI judges that everyone's raising flags about, say unanimously, no, you can't discriminate against white people like that. In fact, not only can you not discriminate against them, you can't say there's an undue extra burden for them to prove that they were discriminated against just because they're white and in the majority. So
have a conservative court. We have a conservative majority court. I don't know.
Right. No, what I'm saying is, even on this conservative court, when a white person is being discriminated against in the workplace, every single judge, not just the conservatives, and also the most progressive of these judges, which is why I cited KJB as the person who gave this opinion, because she was the head. Ketanji Brown Jackson, KJB, whatever. She was the one who did this, like the most progressive, hated of the left judges, who people say is not qualified. She's the one who's giving the opinion that's like, hey, you cannot give an undue burden onto a white person to prove they were discriminated against just because they're in the majority, just because they weren't historically discriminated against. Specifically, they have the exact same burden as anyone else proving their Title VII violation. So it seems like even at the highest, most progressive parts of our government, we are still saying, no, white people are not going to be some like second class. We're not swinging the pendulum to make them, like more discriminated against. And maybe Merriam-Webster or some fucking dictionary used the dumb definition, but a lot of people use it that way, so I get why they added it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like the more that the public opinion shifts on this issue, that this is again back to this issue of the Overton window. These things could shift in such directions to easily, play out the hypotheticals that you and I are describing. And I think that the most likely is that your average Trump supporter will be cast into the same group as Connor or any number of individuals who are seen as much more controversial now.
Yeah, but the problem is, once we're there, Kai, the problem is not, well, should we kick these people out of the workplace? The problem is, well, now the most prominent political figures and the people that support them want a world that, maybe, I don't know if you want this, because I don't remember exactly what you said, but at least what Connor wants, which is an end of freedom of speech. We have a whole different set of fucking issues where it's like, oh, I'm not really worried so much as whether or not this guy makes my friends and family or my coworkers uncomfortable. This guy's going to rip away my First Amendment rights and deport a bunch of my family and shit. So it's just a whole nother issue at that point, and we don't even have to talk about the jobs because that's not going to be relevant.
Well, that's ultimately what it boils down to, though, because the worry with Connor is, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's that, he was making people at work uncomfortable. I think it was probably the fact that he was advocating for these anti-democratic ideas.
Well, I think those things aren't, mutually exclusive. Advocating for those ideas, maybe the employer said, I don't want this person tied to me financially because they make me look bad. But the reason it makes them look bad is because people around, and most people, and people at the company probably, unless you had some crazy fashy company, are like, hey, this is fucking crazy that this person is advocating for this sort of stuff. I don't want them near me, and they make me uncomfortable. And that's perfectly fine to me to get rid of people like that. In the same way that if you had, let's say, like, let's take some crazy left-wing example, or someone's like Hammer and Sickle, Hassan Piker, America deserved 9/11, and then for some reason he wasn't a billionaire and he was employed by the Young Turks, and the Young Turks said, hey, motherfucker, we don't like that on our thing, get out of here. Okay, cool. Like, yeah, you said something crazy left wing. They don't like it. It's causing their bottom line to be hit. Everyone else is like, hey, you think that my dad who died in the Twin Tower attacks deserved it just because of like foreign policy? Like, that's insane, man. That makes me really uncomfortable that you constantly think about my dead family like that. And I don't feel comfortable working with you. And majority of us don't. You should get out. Perfect. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, I think maybe just to close, I think you just got to be more tolerant, man. I think you have to be a more tolerant individual. I don't think people should get kicked out of their jobs for the shirts they wear, for the politicians they support.
If you were in power, would you kick me out, or would you put me in the dissident area? Huh?
Are you an illegal immigrant?
I'm not an illegal immigrant. No, I'm perfectly legal. I'm all sorts of mixed, mishling little, bits of brown and white and Jew, but I'm technically legal. In fact, I'm German. I think you're German, right? Schwemmer, kannst du Deutsch?
Ja, ich kann auch Deutsch sprechen.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Also, lässt die Taten den Worten folgen. I think I'm saying that right now. It's like puts his money where the mouth is, or I forgot how you say it.
Pretty close. That was good.
Yeah. They don't teach idioms in language class, so.
I was gonna say, like, an idiom, to be able to use an idiom in a foreign language shows a lot of fluency. I only learned as a kid, so my fluency's gone down quite a bit, but I can understand the language at least. No, I don't. I mean, where would we kick you to? Like,
All right,
I don't know,
we
the
got
ditch.
Israel will give you citizenship. I mean, you could go there supposedly, but no. I mean, I'm a conservative. I think there's plenty of people in this country who, are not white that are still kind of foundational to what America is. Connor mentioned something that I hadn't thought about before, but yes, there were territories of Mexico that were subsumed in the United States, and there's Hispanic populations that, for that reason, have been here much longer than I or my family have been. Those people would arguably be more American than I, because I think that what America is, is a lot more than just the political perspective you have. Obviously that's an important part of it, but yeah, I don't know. I think I wish that people were more tolerant. I truly don't believe that Connor is an evil person. I think that, admittedly, his representation of his own political views was perhaps not the most nuanced in the moment, and I think that's a pretty consistent thing. You look at somebody like Destiny's Son. You look at Nathaniel. Nathaniel's talking about all kinds of things with like fascism and whatnot. And sure, he is 14, but I think that even the young age is becoming less and less important to people. I think that this might even seriously hinder his ability to have a job in the future, and I don't absolutely think that's fair. I am absolutely in favor of more mercy, of giving people more grace in employment and unemployment.
Sorry to interrupt your closing, but maybe this is like the core of the argument. Maybe there's a through line here that I want to jump in on. So when someone has, let's say, like a fascist belief, like Nathaniel is like literally like, I am a pro-Hitler stan, right? Do you not understand how, even though someone might see that and say, okay, well, that's just your belief, there is a through line into which they would then enact those sorts of beliefs of, hey, this person doesn't want everyone to be equal. This person might not want everyone to have a voice. This person might not value the opinions of other people on the team based on their race or gender than the other people, and I don't think I can work with them. Just on that base level, isn't it so obvious that this person is going to have less of a work ethic that's cohesive with everyone else, unless they all were Hitler stans?
I think that in those kind of decisions, we have to like weigh this factor against the lived reality with that person. And in like all of my lived experience, almost like all of these like kind of more fascist types are far more maybe tolerant and loving and accepting and understanding than the more liberal types, which is very interesting. It could just be because maybe they're in the significant minority right now. Maybe it's this idea.
I'd say it's more that than the other way around, but yeah.
I don't know. I think maybe they've got bigger hearts.
we have some donos here. People want to ask you guys questions. Are you guys up for a quick Q&A?
Yeah, I can stay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, can I give my closing real quick? I mean, Kai interrupted yours if you had more to say, actually.
Let's give the 2-minute closing. Swaypool, you want to go, and I will.
Well, Kai was kind of doing it, so I'll let you finish. Sorry, because I felt like maybe there was a thrill in there, but maybe not.
Okay, Kai, final statement. I'm gonna just give you. That was it. Okay.
I'm tired. I got.
It's good.
Okay. I understand that. I mean, it's interesting to me because I think that there are a lot less defendable things that you could fire someone for that I am advocating for, like their shirt or some stupid thing. And the reason I'm okay with that is I don't think there's necessarily a place to draw a line that makes real perfect sense. And if you have a private business, by the way, federal employees can't do this same thing for your beliefs, for your political beliefs. And certain states will go so far as to say, hey, we don't like it if you fire people for, running for Congress or for, if you were fundraising for, say, a fascist, I think you can't be fired for that in New York, which makes sense. I don't think you should be able to discourage people's or prevent someone else's actions or helping a further political cause outside of that. But when it's just beliefs insofar as you are breaking down the social cohesion of this job, it makes perfect sense for me to be able to fire them. And the reason it gets even more specific when we're talking about people like Connor, and I don't know, I kind of browse Kai's Twitter, and I know some things about him. I don't know how much more extreme or as extreme as Connor as he is. I know he downplayed it a lot, but these people are advocating for you not to have a voice, so it makes perfect sense not to tolerate people who are going to say, hey, I don't want you to be able to vote. I don't want you to be able to have standing in society that I deem fair. I might be in the in-group, it sounds like, cool, but I'm still going to hope that my friends and family and all the other people are included too, and I like that world better. So end of the story is groypers are bad for business, and that's just the way it is. Sorry, guys.
That's a wrap. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for participating in this debate. Very enjoyable. I do have some questions for you guys. We have like maybe 5 questions or so we can go through, and I'll go through those right now. I do have a donation from Lyden B. Bonson. Name the trait that supports firing for politics yet protects alcoholics as a class, which is a part of the existing CRA you endorse. They aren't discriminated and they can control it. Contradiction. I think that
Um,
was
I'm sure that's
for
directed at
Soy.
me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was unaware that alcoholics are not allowed to be fired. I think they totally can be, right? Especially if you're fucking getting drunk on the job. There might be something you might need to elaborate there, and I'd hate for it to make them spend more money on it. But my understanding is that abuse of drugs and alcohol is absolutely something you can be fired for, and that's also, I don't know if you would call that intrinsic. You might have uh, genetics that are prone to addiction, but I mean, I guess some babies are born crack addicts, but that doesn't really count. So
We have
not
another,
really sure what he's getting
yeah.
at.
It's an interesting thought, especially the question about being intrinsic. But another donation, Barney Styles. Thank you, Barney. If I think this is addressed to Soy again. If I, as an employer, do not fire an employee with extreme views, does that mean my business supports those views?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you could be like Kai. I'm sure he would call certain beliefs I have extreme, and if he's telling the truth and would totally hire me, and even if a world where people like him were the majority, I don't think that means he endorses me. He's just saying I don't care. And plenty of businesses do this. I mean, you get some person go online, have some scandal, scream the N-word, and they're like, "Look, we don't care that you did this. We don't think it hurts our bottom line. You can still work here. This happens all the time." I don't think that means they necessarily endorse it, but they are saying they don't have a problem with it. So.
This next one rather interesting. I think both of you can maybe answer this one. Soy, I'll ask you first because I think it's more addressed to you. But Kai, I'm interested in your take as well. From Row House, how much is this a product of social media technology? Your political views are tracked 24/7, 30 years ago nobody knew your views unless you stated it at work.
Yeah, I mean, a big part, especially considering the topic of this debate is a guy on a social media platform. I would say it's gotten much worse. And I would even be sympathetic to Kai arguing that we need more restrictions or at least more leeway now that everything is broadcast. I mean, specifically your example of Nathaniel, I think is a good one because there's a ton of shit I said as a kid that, I grew up in a crazy multiracial society, the multiracial school, and if everything I've ever said was out there on the internet permanently, I'd probably not get hired at a lot of places. So I wouldn't be okay with saying that necessarily you've now done the mark of the beast. We put the red scarlet letter on you, and you can never do anything again because you said something when you were 12. I think that people can change, and I think employers can use their discretion about that. But if you just said it last week, I think that's a different story. But yeah, it's a little harder now that everything's on social media.
Yeah, I think for my bit, that's a huge part of it. When we talk about like the social ostracization, admittedly, this is kind of changing, but I also think that it'll be getting worse in certain ways. One of the things I forgot to mention during the debate is like the divide that we're seeing between men and women. I think we'll get to a point where you see like a young white dude, for example, and people will like kind of make these assumptions before they even investigate the idea, just because of how successful dissident right ideas or conservative right ideas, anything from Charlie Kirk to Nick Fuentes, have gotten or have become with those younger right men. And certainly, social media is a huge part of that. Social media is creating that culture where, and it's funny because I feel this in my own life. It's like there's people who keep up with me who I was going to school with in high school, who I know just through like other mutual friends hate me, but they have never told me that ever in my life. So if I were to encounter this person in person once again, and I hadn't been told these things by this like mediator friend, right? I could go up and look for a handshake or a hug or anything like that, but unfortunately with the way that social media works, so much of our perceptions of other people are formed kind of behind closed doors and so much less in interactions. What I care about much more, and this is kind of what Soy and I talked about at the end, is how are people interacting with each other? I think there's a great capacity and potential for brotherhood, even with people with whom you disagree incredibly starkly. But I think that now those disagreements are made into an inevitability of violence whenever they're discussed.
We just have a $1 donation from Leiden. That's incorrect to say this is addressed to Soy. That's incorrect. Soy 2008 ADA Amendment Act significantly lowered the standard for alcoholism as a disability.
I guess I'll have to look into this. If like there was something where they're like, hey, you can't just fire someone for being an alcoholic. Let's say this. I think there are a lot of reasonable arguments as to why people who have made mistakes in the past shouldn't be judged forever and ostracized. I'm a big advocate for felons' rights to vote and to not be discriminated against in hiring, as long as they can show that they're going to be someone who works within the system perfectly well. And if alcoholics are now part of that group that seem extra discriminated against, if they're not causing any problems but they have some vices at home, yeah, maybe they should get a little more leeway.
He followed up with that comment with another dollar donation. Only if the alcoholism affects the tasks of the job, they cannot be fired by simply creating an unpleasant work environment.
Simply for
Which
creating an
alcoholics often
unpleasant
do.
work environment. Interesting. So, like, if everyone says, oh, I see what he's saying. So, in the same way that, let's say you worked at a job and everyone was white and you had a black guy, and it's like, hey, black people are scary and they all want to fire him. You can't do that because they're a protected class. Alcoholics can't be intrinsically fired just because, hey, we know you go to AA meetings or something like that. Yeah, I think that's perfectly acceptable if they're coping or dealing with something and getting over it. In the same way, actually, I think if you had some sort of Fascists Anonymous and you showed that you were going through some of a sort of reform process, maybe you could let some
Alt-right
fascists there.
recovery.
Alt-right recovery, that's a good one. AA.
Alt-right
I'm
recovery.
watching Destiny. I'm taking my blue pills. I'm watching Destiny. I'm
Yes.
in alt-right
Yes.
recovery.
Get them to
We
alt-right
have,
recovery, folks.
We have $5 from Row House. What is this a question? Donald Trump is going after college students for protesting Israel. Is opposed by both of you. Is it different when students express politics on a college campus versus an employer? Your views on this? We can address it to both of you guys. Swaypill?
Well, it's a totally different scenario, right? Like if the private college says you're violating some term of conduct and like we don't, like what you're doing here, like I guess I'm not really in favor of private colleges ejecting people for protesting something that's completely unrelated to the college. But what I'm really against is the government cracking down on protesters at all. So I think that's much more of an issue. Whether or not like Columbia or any of these like private institutions can do it, I guess that kind of falls a little more in line with the employer thing. If that's what they profess is their stated conduct, and that's the contract you signed or whatever when you went to the college. But I think they're stretching that a little bit, and especially when the government gets involved, it becomes a whole different story of violating the First Amendment. So.
Yeah, I think for me, I wish there was just a little bit more consistency in terms of like a pro-America focus, like the fact that we seem to be cracking down more on the negative sentiments that students had about foreign nations rather than concerning like ourselves with what they thought of ours. I think that was a huge issue. The fact that there were court cases talking about and recategorizing, for example, like anti-Zionism or kind of pro-Palestinian sentiments to be anti-Jewish in particular, which could be extended to having the burning of the Israeli flag be made illegal. The fact that we had that happen before the executive order recently of making of the American flag illegal is it shows the betrayal of priorities.
Well, look, hey, if there's any bridges being built here, we both speak German, we both hate Israel, so let's horseshoe theory it up, right?
Let's go.
I have a couple questions for Kai from my audience, if that's okay, Daniela.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so my shiny Lugia asks, Kai, what makes the comfort of the instigator more valuable than everyone else in the situation? Not as discrimination, but why not protect the many?
The big thing is that at the discomfort of the others.
Wait, hold on. You lagged out right when you started, and it's just getting better. Could you start it over? Sorry.
Myself uncomfortable by being able. Yes, like you. It's the idea that it's not so much that the comfort of the instigator is more important. It's that the discomfort of others is largely self-imposed. I could make myself or consider myself the most uncomfortable, but should not give my my perspective on a matter any greater precedent than any other person. And I think the unfortunate thing is that nowadays, whoever screams the loudest, those are the people who tend to get their way. So that would be my response to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if you didn't answer that, I was going to steal man and say, like, it's not about, oh, the discomfort is more important of this one person. It's that the discomfort of the many people is kind of misplaced and not necessary for society, is kind of what you're getting at.
Mm.
Yeah.
And also, like, we see it also get worse over time when in reality, maybe the situation the instigator hasn't gotten worse, but the responses have become more, I'd say, like they scream out harsher.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And like I said, like if people were just doing some ridiculous ass discrimination that is not illegal, but you know they're just firing people for no fucking reason, I would advocate for them to grow a pair and stop caring so much. But I don't think it should be made a protected government action to make sure those people can't get fired. I just would say, hey guys, it's really not a big deal to have just a Republican at your job. But a second question here from 8 Grants says, for both of you, tits or ass, and should you get fired for said opinion? And I guess I'm a ass. I don't know, but no, you shouldn't get fired for it, but you can be.
I think it's a little bit scandalous. I almost don't even want to say, but probably the latter, which is going to upset some of the pro Suckle Gang followers. They're going to think I've like betrayed the movement, but yeah, you should tap into that, Soy Pill. I think you'd probably be down for the movement.
The Suckle Gang? What's the is this your following?
We're defunct right now because it's like a little too anatomical, maybe not appropriate. I came back from my mission and I did some soul searching and thought, okay, maybe I shouldn't be talking about like women's breasts so frequently. But the idea, basically, it starts that the baby formulas that are on the market are often not very good. They don't adequately address the nutritional needs of a child. Breast milk's like a total superfood. It actually can change its nutritional composition based off the needs of the child. And prolonged breastfeeding has also very strongly correlated in several studies with higher intelligence in the child. That being said, to my knowledge, there have not been any long-term studies studying the effects of prolonged breastfeeding.
How long are we talking about prolonged? We're talking like 12, 15? Like when do we stop? Or never?
I don't know if we've gotten past like the 3-year mark or more. I don't know if it's been studied. But the idea, and I'm not suggesting we test it, but the idea is that some of those results, they would track, they would continue. And there is also the idea of it being a natural reward mechanism for going through the process of having a child. But anyway.
And as much as I say that there's totally plausible benefits to that, I think you should be fired if bringing this up at the lunchroom. The female and maybe even male employees might feel uncomfortable.
Human resources? He's talking about Suckle Gang again.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone in my chat named Jacob says, "Hi, I debated you, Mr. Kai. Hi again." Jacob says hi.
Which Jacob? Where's he from?
Jacob Nissan. I guess he works for the car company or something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I remember that. We got into a huge discussion about
at his college.
VW versus Nissan. No, no. Maybe he was from UF. Maybe he was from the University of Florida. Because I just got back from there. Well, anyway, hey,
probably.
What's up, man?
First name, last name. Oh yeah, you got some more. Sorry, go ahead.
I still have 3 more that just came in. Sorry, I don't know if you have more. We have $1 from Leiden. Again, this is for you, Soy Pill. If only one person were uncomfortable with Connor, would the EEOC be justified to go after his company for only transferring the uncomfortable employee instead of firing Connor?
I don't think either of these things would go to the EEOC. This is like a classic, hey, you've got a problem in the workplace question in your interview. How do you work it out? Regardless of whether or not Connor is a fascist or just a guy who's like, a little gets on one guy's nerves. If it's just a one-on-one thing, the employer's going to figure out, hey, which one of you is more useful? Which one of you is more compromising? And which one of you is actually going to, in the end, be more beneficial to the rest of the workers here? And if it's well, he said, she said, they're just going to pick. This has happened all the time in a lot of workplaces that I've been in. It has nothing to do with fascism. But yeah, if it was just one guy and it was a fascism thing, then yeah, whatever. It's just one guy. I don't think you need the EEOC here. There's no protected class being violated.
Okay. And we have $1 from Steelbringer. I think this is in reference to the previous question with the Israel protests. What if it's organized by other world powers as hybrid warfare?
So like if Hamas was like funding a protest on a private college campus, I don't think that makes it more justifiable or less justifiable. I guess if you're saying because then whether or not the government can step in, honestly, I don't know about how the law works when it's like, hey, your grassroots organization is being funded by Iran and they're our enemy, therefore the government needs to step in and do something about that. I don't know. I think even then the government should stop the students from protesting. They should just cut off the money from Iran or freeze the accounts that are trying to subvert the stuff and let the students do whatever they want. But I don't know. What do you think, Kai? Should people be able to protest Israel?
Yeah, I think it should be allowed to protest it. I think sometimes that's the idea, right? Is, the anti-Israel protests are like funded by Qatar or whatever. Most of the time, like in actuality, like you investigate those claims, it's not like at all how it is. But when you say that Qatar spends like $7 billion on the education system in the United States or in education, then it sounds, that's like that's what's happening. When in reality, it's not the way that it's occurring. I think the protests are good. But again, it's like what I said before. I think, where I have more of an issue is when they become, more so treasonous against the United States. Like, I think that the burning of the American flag was like a super big deal. I think that is an issue. I think we ought to be pledging.
You support the flag burning law ban?
I do, yeah.
Okay. So I don't know, it seems weird that on one hand you're advocating, hey, let the fasci people, at your job be a little less sensitive, but also if you burn my American flag, go to jail, buddy. Like this is like the whole problem with the fascist rhetoric is like, oh yeah, no, you have to be 100% tolerant of everything I believe, but the instant you do one thing I don't like, you're going to jail. Is that's a really good illustration of everything wrong with letting people like you into our workplaces. So.
Well, I think that I'm not at all advocating for something that is anything too radical. I think the fact that
violation of the First Amendment is pretty radical, buddy. Unfortunately, now it's the Trump thing, so it's in the Overton window, but that's pretty fashy.
Hold on. We're talking about like Supreme Court precedent from like 1989 with Katie v. Texas.
Yeah, and I think it was crazy before they decided that too. That doesn't mean that just because it wasn't legal doesn't mean it's fucking crazy to say, hey, if you destroy this piece of property, you're going to jail, even if it's your piece of property. That's fucking insane.
We reduce the U.S. flag to a piece of property. We also divorce it from the fact that it is an object to which we pledge allegiance, right? I don't know if you've ever pledged allegiance.
I unfortunately have. It's fucking creepy that we pledge allegiance, honestly.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. When people burn the American flag, they make a statement to some degree that they are attempting to create a separation, some kind of mutiny or some kind of treason against the United States. I think that's the case. And I think Trump admittedly was pretty even-handed. I don't love everything he does, but I think he was pretty even-handed in also reminding us that when violence occurs associated with the burning of the U.S. flag, it's not only on the side of the people who are burning it, but also on the way that incites people who do see it as an act kind of treason against the country.
What do you think about people burning like an LGBTQ flag? Would you say that's like a statement against the integrity of the gays and the queers and the transes?
If like the burning,
like if they burned it,
burning
like
of the gay flag is what?
Like it's like an inherent statement of violence and against everything the gays stand for, and it's therefore shouldn't be allowed. And sorry, did you answer? I didn't hear. Did you say yes or no?
Yeah.
Or
I mean, obviously, it's something that would be done in clear opposition to them. Certainly.
No. I know. Obviously, it's in clear opposition. I'm saying, like, should these people be, treated as some sort of like violent intention people who might do something else, or is it just them expressing their distaste with the LGBT community or whatever?
I think that depends on the context. Like within the context of the United States flag, what you're declaring is a rebellion to something that must be a uniting value among all Americans.
I don't think any American has a uniting value on anything. Like that's kind of the whole point of the country.
That's kind of where we arrive at the issue, is because we don't pledge allegiance to the flag. And we don't pledge allegiance to the republic.
It's mandatory in public schools still, right?
It should be mandatory in every school, but it was something that I never did after elementary school. I never did it in middle school.
That's true. I never did it after middle school, and to be honest, I never understood it when I was in elementary and middle, because it didn't make sense to me to say, hey, inanimate object, you are worthy of my respect and utmost devotion, and I pledge to you. I think it's pretty fucking stupid. If you support American views, I think you can fly the flag. I think if you want to protest the government, you can burn the flag. And our country is literally founded on like distrusting the government and overthrowing it and saying, hey, we want to rebel and all that. And the idea that burning it deserves jail time is a fascist view. And you can support that, and that's fine. But damn, man, I wouldn't hire you.
I think that the people who died hoisting the flag probably weren't dying so that you could burn it. I think that was not their intention.
That's actually I don't care what their intention are, but that is exactly what they were doing, was fighting for our freedom to do some crazy shit such as burn the flag and protest. And I don't think, unless you're actually hurting anyone, there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I don't know if Francis Scott Key would agree with you. I don't know.
Oh no, I'm sure he wouldn't.
Would agree with you.
Well, to be fair, I probably disagree with a lot of the founding fathers. So
we got a few more. I want to be fair to my subs
I
here.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Your priority
yeah,
here. I've got a couple more questions.
I gotta go.
let's,
Oh
let's
yeah,
see.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Let's
know. I
speed
know
run.
that Kai is on the go, so I want to make sure we get through these in case someone asks him a question. I know there's one addressed to you, Kai, in here. Okay, from Nelson65. What is your limit to what a person can be fired for?
Set to me.
Let's keep it
Let's keep it
brief
short.
here so we can get through these. Yeah.
Protected class. I'm pretty much in line with how the law works right now. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Alrighty. And then Steelbringer asks if this is about the last question with Israel protests. If they lied on their visa to come here, question mark.
I don't think that should have anything to do with whether or not they're allowed to protest. If they lied on their visa, that's an immigration violation, and they should be either ejected for illegal trespassing, or they should have some fine or some sort of consequence. But it just doesn't mean they shouldn't be allowed to protest. But the government does step in at that point. Yeah.
Okay. And Row House is asking, Kai, in your view, is the only way you would get fired in America for being too left-wing on an issue is being too anti-Israel or pro-Palestinian? Would this happen before saying something anti-American?
Wait, could you read the last part of that again? I don't know if I heard that
The last
well.
sentence? Yeah. Would this happen before saying something anti-American?
Like what your
no.
limit to firing people? Yeah. Like would it stop at
No.
like the line is drawn at you're being anti-American, or not even that? Like you could be anti-American and not be fired, or
Like well, hold on. It's a different conversation. Like the protest. I think we're conflating the two conversations of
No,
like the workforce.
this is the second thing he's asking is like, could you fire someone for like what's the limit of them being too far left and now they should be allowed to be fired, or is there no limit there? And should anti-Americans people? It's kind of like a two-part question about firing.
Like the thing about Zionism. Like I don't know if the commentator thinks that I'm like trying to say that the government ought to first respond to the people who are like protesting Zionism or Israel or Palestine. It's like, no, I think that the United States should absolutely first defend its interests. I think that any kind of anti-American sentiment ought to be dealt with more efficaciously, like with greater speed and with larger gravity than we would respond to things that concern other nations.
Do you think that you should be able to be fired for saying I don't like America?
Saying I don't like America, I think is probably
saying America deserved 9/11.
There, especially knowing who it came from, I think we could definitely work that in. We could work that in for sure.
Interesting. Okay. But not for being fascist, because that's your thing.
Oh, he's
promoting. That's probably something you should start for.
Sorry, you are lagging out again. Maybe don't walk around. Your Wi-Fi only extends to certain corners of your green screen.
We got just one more comment. That's just a comment. It's my flag. I will burn what I want. Thank you, Entrepreneur Nomad, for the generous donation.
Yeah.
Okay, Swipe, if you have any additional ones.
Yeah, real quick. Connor, if you can hear again from first name, last name says, to what you said about fascist views, can you explain what type of fascism respects human dignity? Are the camps extra wholesome or something?
Again, this is like I don't think I ever made the claim that like fascism respects human dignity. That's not my perspective.
Well, the reason they're asking that, Kai, is that you are saying, hey, you need to respect our more fascist views. Let's say Connor, maybe if you're not fascist, Connor definitely says, I am a fascist. We have to respect those sorts of views, but those people won't respect our views when they put people at dissidents in camps, which is something that Connor was talking about, and killing people that were in out groups, which is also something that Connor was talking about. So why respect that at all is what he's asking.
The person who asked that question asked what you just said at all. I think what they were asking is how can fascism as a political philosophy respect human dignity, especially given the war crimes that fascist regimes have committed? And my response is that I don't think it does. I think that plenty of fascist regimes do not. I think that the only way that you do consistently apply a respect for human dignity is by grounding your political ideology in Christian ethics. I think that's how you have to do it. I don't believe in like, this makes right kind of political ideology. Is there any more questions?
For you, pretty much more stuff about the flag code thing. I think we showed you're very consistent with your saying get rid of the people that say anti-American extreme stuff and not the other stuff. Yeah, your true colors. That was fun. Hey, look, as much as I think you were obfuscating and kind of downplaying some fascist stuff, I appreciate that you at least had which is weird to say, a better back and forth than I have with a lot of other people. But at the end of the day, I hope that people like you disappear. And since you're not going to, please, please, please never try to do anything fun. Don't boogaloo or anything, because
Don't-
I'm not. I'm trying to keep it civil. Okay, I don't want to have to go
Bill,
get my guns.
Niels,
Hmm.
I love you. It makes me happy that you lift weights. I'm gonna try to do that hopefully tomorrow if I'm not under the weather. It's gonna be deadlift day. Let's
Okay.
flip and go.
Hey, it's deadlift day for me
And-
too. Hey, look, olive branch to you. I would say, tell you what, buddy, you come out here. I don't know if you've ever been to the Bay Area, but you come out here and I'm going to take you to all the fun liberal places with all the smartest people I've ever met from all corners of the world, who are recent immigrants, who are native Anglo people, who are making some of the coolest fucking science you've ever seen up at the Lawrence National Lab. And you'll say, oh, wait, maybe I am just fucking retarded. And you'll learn that everyone is very, very cool and diversity is our strength.
I don't think I'd say that because that includes several expletives that I try to avoid.
Okay, you'll say it nicely. You'll say it all cool and fun.
But hey, I love you. Thanks for debating. Appreciate you guys for the patience. Thank you very much, Danielle, as well. Daniela, my apologies.
no problem. You made it. That's what matters. Thank you, gentlemen, for this wonderful debate. I'm going to go on a quick commercial break. Thank you, everyone that has tuned in and sent in your donations. Let's give a round of applause for our friends here. Thank you, guys. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening.